Welcome to my channel where we cover the lore of video games. We cover all kinds from the mainstream to the indie, so I hope you enjoy your stay, and welcome to the Chronicler of Lore. With the conclusion of the Myths of the Realm raid, we now have 5 Alliance raid series in Final Fantasy XIV, which, considering the fact that each of them have 3 parts complete with bosses and lore, that's a lot of stuff. But how do they stack up against one another? In a lot of ways, comparing them is unfair. It's clear that over time the scale of the spectacle has improved, the areas look more polished, and some of the encounters have gotten exponentially cooler simply because the development team has more things to draw on to create their bosses. But there's one area where graphical and mechanical enhancements don't change the quality of the instance, and that's the story. Each of these raids have their own story that expands the lore of Final Fantasy XIV as a whole. So what we're going to compare is which stories were the best and which ones fell short. Everyone has their own opinion on what they feel is the best or worst story, and since I spend way too much time analyzing this game's lore, it only makes sense that I share my list with you all. So here's my ranking of the Alliance raid stories from worst to best. The minute I mention story, a lot of people probably already guessed that at the bottom of my list would be the Nier crossover Yorha Dark Apocalypse. I'm a big fan of Nier. I 100% completed the PS3 version of Nier and its replicant re-release, as well as Nier Automata, and mixed in with all of the weirdness and meta commentary that's been a part of the Dragon Nier world since forever, is a story that I really like. The problem with the Nier crossover is twofold. The first one's pretty obvious. This isn't a Nier game. It's Final Fantasy, so all of the stories have to expand the world of 14 in some way. Characters have to be made that have some type of impact on the world overall, and that didn't happen here. The second problem is the MMO medium doesn't work for telling a Nier story as a side quest. The stories are too complicated and have too many twists and turns to simply fit into a 3-patch quest chain. There would be holes, unanswered questions, and things left undone that wouldn't happen when Nier is happening in its own world. The references to all of their lore was cool, but that's only because I've played all of the games. People who haven't wouldn't have enjoyed those, so from a story perspective, this was easily the worst Alliance raid. If we were talking about aesthetics and bosses, this one is tied with my favorite raid. But we're not talking about that, so Yorha Dark Apocalypse can enjoy the number 5 spot. Number 4 belongs to the newest raid series, Myths of the Realm. This story started off doing everything right. It focused on world elements that people have been interested in for years and did what every story strives to do. It got people interested. From the minute Birago the bodybuilder said that the 12 were not primals and sent the students of Valdecian on a mission to find out what they were and what they were planning, the story sucked you in. The problem came when you realized that even though we were supposed to be done with Hydaelyn after the main story of Endwalker, it turns out that the 12 are nothing more than versions of the ancients who supported Vana in her mission to sunder the world and let mortals guide their own path. They're the Watcher if people knew about him and prayed to him. And what was their goal with bringing you into their realm and fighting you? To die so their energy could go back to the planet. Not for any specific purpose, not to end a great threat or make some of the inhospitable areas of Aetheris more habitable. Nope, it was just to allow the prayers of man to power the planet instead of them. And if the ether is needed, I guess people will be able to use it, but they won't, because they won't know about it. Because if you tell the world that the gods are dead, things will likely go to crap. So in other words, we found out that the 12 were nothing special and they sucked at their job, since their method of non-intervention extended to letting mortals figure out how to deal with their unsundered Zodiac-loving counterparts. So while the spectacle was great and the story was good up until the finale, the ending was average at best and doesn't really do much more than put an end to a group of beings that could have been far more interesting than they were. Number 3 is the Shadows of Ma'at series. This story has everything to make a very well-rounded plot filled with interesting characters in the Sky Pirates and Kite Sith, a good villain with Diabolos, and expanding on the War of the Magi in ways that left plenty of room to give you more info about what is one of the most underexplored eras in the history of Eorzea. The Red Bills are some of the best side characters who have been interesting every time they pop back up in the story, and the fact that the story of this raid technically starts in the dungeons Amdapor Keep in the lost city of Amdapor shows that the roots of this story had been set long before it even got fully underway. That's probably why it was so satisfying. Number 2 is the Return to Ivalice series, and honestly, had it not been for the fact that the Crystal Tower series basically got upgraded to part of the MSQ and had an entire expansion built around it, this would have been my favorite story. And while Final Fantasy Tactics is my favorite Final Fantasy game, that's only a very small part of why I enjoyed this story so much. In fact, up until the story got expanded with Bajda, Return to Ivalice was beneath the Shadows of Ma'ak series on my story enjoyment meter. But the excitement of hanging around with the descendants of Ramsus' bloodline, facing off against his friends before duking it out with Ultima after getting help from the Dalmascan resistance, drew you into a side story that was potentially as large as some AAA game titles. And that story continued with the Save the Queen series, which was also fantastic when it comes to making the world of Final Fantasy XIV feel so much larger in scale than the handful of areas that we constantly travel to. There are other lands out there complete with their own history and relics, and it's all waiting for us to explore them. My only gripe is the fact that they decided to end the story with the equivalent of an email instead of letting us experience how it would have all turned out. And that leads us over to number 1, which is of course the Crystal Tower series. There's honestly not that much that needs to be explained about why this story sits at the top of the list. The Allagans in this tower are pretty much responsible for everything that happened from Shadowbringers onward. And comparing this story, which is fully a part of the MSQ, to the others is downright unfair. But since it's on the Alliance Roulette, it gets the top spot, and it will likely keep it forever because Square Enix loves making us use this tower over and over again. Anyway, that's my list. Do you agree with it or disagree? Love it or hate it? Let me know in the comment section below. Also, be sure to hit the like button and share the video. Donate to the channel if you can, and I'll see you all next time.